AITA for refusing to help pay off my brother's debt, even though my dad says I'm ungrateful after that identical brother once beat me so badly. I ended up in the hospital. I'm 32 years old. I live alone in a small rented apartment and work full time. Nothing fancy. I don't have a husband or kids. Honestly, I'm okay with that. Peace has become more important to me than pretending I have a picture-perfect life. But apparently, peace is something I'm not allowed to have in this family. Because last weekend, my dad called me out of nowhere. He didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't even start with a hello. Just opened with, "Your brother's in trouble. You need to help." I paused. Help with what he sighed like I was already being difficult. Debt. He owes a few people. Credit cards, gambling, maybe. He didn't say exactly, but he's in deep. I was quiet for a few seconds because this wasn't my brother's first time in deep. And every time, someone else had to bail him out. Dad continued, saying he needed about $5. 000 to get these guys off his back. You have a job. You're not married. No kids. You can afford it. There it was, the classic Carter family logic. I'm automatically the backup plan because I don't have a husband or kids. The family's unofficial emergency fund. The one who's always supposed to step up because I don't have a real family to look after, I said, as calmly as I could. Dad, I'm not giving him $5,000. Dead silence. Then came the explosion. Are you serious? Are you really that selfish? He's your brother? He's blood. You're going to let him drown while you sit on your money like some ungrateful little... That word, ungrateful. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Ungrateful, I almost laughed. Almost. If he thinks I'm ungrateful. Maybe it's time someone reminded him why I stopped calling, why I stopped visiting, and why I've been keeping my distance for years. I breathed and said, "Do you remember the last time I was in the hospital? Dad?" He paused. What does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it. Because the person who put me there was the identical brother you're now asking me to save. Another silence. This one felt heavier. Let me back up. When I was 24, I lived at home after college, trying to pay off student loans. My brother, let's call him Mark, was already showing signs of what he'd eventually become: impulsive, angry, and violent when things didn't go his way. He'd drink too much, pick fights, slam doors, break things. One night, we had a stupid argument about the TV. He wanted to play Xbox with his friends. I was watching a movie. I told him to wait an hour. He didn't like that answer. He shoved me. I shoved back. And then he lost it. I don't remember how many times he hit me. I remember the blinding pain, the sound of my head hitting the edge of the coffee table, and then waking up in a hospital bed the next morning with stitches near my eyebrow and a cracked rib. My mother cried when she saw me. My dad stood in the corner, arms crossed, jaw tight, but no one called the cops. No one reported anything because, you see, Mark didn't mean it. He was drunk. He's your brother. Dad's exact words that night, I'll never forget them. You know how he gets. You should have just let him play the damn game. That was the moment something inside me broke. I realized then that in this family, being the girl meant being the one who had to keep the peace, even if it meant bleeding for it. I was expected to swallow my pain, forgive, move on, and show up to family dinners like nothing ever happened. And I tried, for years. Birthdays, Christmas, I smiled, made small talk, and kept my distance from Mark. He never apologized, not once. He acted like the whole thing was some exaggerated memory I invented. Eventually, I moved out, cut contact, slowly, quietly. I didn't make a scene. I just faded out of their lives. Until last week, when the same father who once stood silent while I lay bruised and bandaged in a hospital bed now dares to call me ungrateful because I won't fork over $5,000 for the man who put me there. I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, "No, I'm not doing it." He hung up on me. "No, I understand. No. I'm sorry about what happened back then, just silence. And now I'm left wondering, am I wrong here? I remember the night like it's burned into my skin. It was raining, not the soft kind that makes you nostalgic, but the kind that slaps against windows like it's trying to break in. I had just gotten home from my shift at the bookstore, exhausted, soaked through my jacket, and hungry. Mark was already in the living room, beer in one hand, controller in the other, yelling at the screen. His two friends were over, laughing like idiots, empty bottles littering the floor. I didn't even say anything. I just dropped my bag and walked to the kitchen. Then he shouted, "Turn the fucking Wi-Fi back on." Emily. I froze. I hadn't touched the router. He stormed in, swearing, accusing me of messing with the signal because my shitty laptop was probably downloading garbage again. I told him to calm down, that I hadn't even been home, but Mark never listened when he was drunk. He got in my face. I tried walking past him, but he blocked me. I told him to move. He didn't. I pushed his arm aside, and then it happened. It wasn't one punch. It was a flurry of fists to the side of my head, then another to my ribs. I hit the floor. I tried to cover myself, but he kicked me once, maybe twice, before one of his friends finally pulled him back. I could hear them panicking. One of them kept saying, "Shit! Man! She's bleeding!" while the others scrambled for their stuff and ran out. I don't remember being taken to the hospital, just that I woke up in a sterile white room with a splitting headache and a nurse checking my vitals. I remember her eyes kind but tired. She looked like someone who'd seen this before. My mom showed up an hour later. Her eyes were red. I thought she'd finally defend me. But instead, she just said, "It's not as bad as it looks." Right. Then she begged me not to make a scene. "He's your brother. He didn't mean to. You were both just tense." It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I was bruised, stitched, and hooked to an IV. And Dad, he showed up last. He didn't speak to me. He talked to the doctor. Then he stood at the foot of my bed and said, "Don't blow this out of proportion. We don't call the cops on family." I just stared at him. Not one person asked how I felt. Not one person asked what I needed. The doctor suggested a police report. My dad shook his head before I even had a chance to respond. "It'll ruin his life," he said. "He's young. You know how boys are." He just snapped. And that was it. No charges, no therapy, no accountability, just silence. Mark ate cereal when I got home days later as if nothing had happened. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look at me. My bruises faded. The pain eventually dulled. But what stayed with me was the message that came through loud and clear in this family. Survival means staying silent. If you speak up, you're the problem. If you scream, you're being dramatic. They'll act like you're making a scene if you say, "I'm not okay." I didn't move out immediately. I still had loans, no savings, and nowhere to go. So I did what many people do in families like mine and swallowed my rage. I buried it under polite smiles and forced dinners. Even though everything inside me was cracking, I played the good daughter role. Years passed, and even after I moved out, I still carried that silence with me like a damn inheritance, because no one ever brought it up again. No one. And now, a decade later, they want me to forget it happened. Again. Like trauma has an expiration date. But I remember everything. I remember the thud of my head hitting the coffee table. I remember the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I remember the way my father looked at me as if I was being difficult, not broken. I remember how my mother cried for him, not for me. I've never told anyone the whole story, not even my closest friends, because when you grow up being told to keep quiet, shame clings to you like mold. But I'm done staying silent. I'm done pretending that what he did to me didn't matter, because it did, and it still does. The phone hasn't stopped buzzing since I said no. First, it was my dad again, calling and texting and leaving voicemails that got angrier with each message. So that's it. You're turning your back on your family. You're letting your brother drown. You've changed. Emily, you used to have a heart. Then my mom chimed in, not to ask if I was okay, not to acknowledge what had happened in the past. Just one text. Don't punish all of us for something that happened years ago. Years ago. That's how they talk about it now. Something. Like I tripped and scraped my knee. Not like I was beaten unconscious by my brother and told to shut up about it. Then came the siblings. Sarah, my older sister, who's always tried to stay neutral, sent me a long, carefully worded message about how families are complicated. Everyone has flaws. And forgiveness is strength. We're not perfect, but we need each other. You don't get to walk away just because you're hurt. I stared at her text for 10 minutes, trying not to throw my phone across the room. I don't get to walk away. Where were they when I couldn't walk for a week because my ribs hurt so badly? Where were they when I had to lie at work about the bruises on my face? Where were they when I cried in the shower? Wondering if I deserved what happened because nobody else seemed to care. But sure, now that Mark is in trouble, suddenly I'm essential again. Now I'm family again. They only remember me when they need saving. I haven't replied to any of them. Not out of spite, but because I honestly don't know what to say anymore. I've spent years pretending everything was fine, years minimizing my pain to make others comfortable. I played the quiet one, the strong one, the one who always helped. I helped my sister move into her new apartment. I co-signed a car loan for my younger cousin when his credit was garbage. I attended every holiday dinner, even when I was the only one bringing gifts. And through it all, not once did anyone say thank you for being there. They just expected it. They expected me to say yes, to help, to clean up the messes, to sacrifice. And now that I finally said no, the mask has come off. Suddenly, I'm cold. I'm heartless. I'm the bad daughter. But deep down, I know what this is. This isn't about money. It's never really about money. It's about control. Because I've done something they can't manipulate for the first time in my life. I said no, and it's killing them. I sat alone in my apartment last night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the times I should have stood up for myself but didn't. When Mark stole cash from my wallet, I let it go because he was going through something. When I caught Mom lying to cover for him, I swallowed it because I didn't want to cause tension. The time I was sitting on the floor of the hospital, ribs aching, and still apologized to my parents for causing drama. That was the worst part, not the violence, the silence. The part where I started believing maybe they were right, that maybe my pain was too loud. Perhaps I was the problem. It's taken me almost a decade to realize the truth. I wasn't broken. I was conditioned. I am conditioned to make myself small, to keep the peace, to forgive, even when no one has asked for forgiveness. But not anymore. Because here's what I know now: love that demands your silence isn't love. The family that only shows up when you're useful isn't family. And I'm allowed to walk away from people who only see my worth when they need something from me, even if they call me heartless, even if they never speak to me again. Because, for once, I'm choosing myself, and that should be enough. It happened on a Tuesday. I still don't know why I picked it up. My phone rang. Dad. I stared at the name for a moment, thumb hovering. A part of me wanted to ignore it like all the other times, but something inside me was tired of running, tired of hiding behind silence. So I answered, "Emily," he said. His voice was sharp and controlled, that tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable but wasn't. "I don't understand you anymore." I didn't respond. He went on. "You used to be a good girl. You used to care about this family. Now you're acting like a stranger." My fingers curled around the phone. Maybe because I've been treated like one for most of my life. There was a pause. There was a beat of silence on his end. Then, "What's that supposed to mean?" I laughed. Not out of amusement, but that bitter, broken laugh that bubbles up when you've held something in for too long. "Do you want to know what it means?" I asked. "It means I'm done pretending. I'm done letting you rewrite the past." His voice rose. "Nobody's rewriting anything. We're just trying to move on." Move on, I cut him off. You mean to forget? You want me to forget that your son beat me half to death? And you told me it was my fault. He didn't say anything. I pressed on, each word sharper than the last. You told me to keep quiet. You told me not to involve the police. You stood there, watching me bleed, and acted like I was the problem. And now, years later, you want money from me to save him, the same person who never even said sorry, Emily. He was young. No. There are no excuses this time. My voice cracked. But I didn't stop. You never protected me. Not once. You protected him. You always did. And I lived with that. I swallowed that truth every damn day. But not anymore. He let out a long breath. We're family. Family means something. No. Dad, family should mean something. But you made it mean sacrifice for some. Comfort for others. I was the sacrifice. Mark was the comfort. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear hit my shirt. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. That maybe. After all this time, he'd say the words I'd needed to hear for over a decade. But instead, he said, "You're being dramatic." And that broke me more than any punch ever could. "Then it's better if we don't speak anymore," I said, my voice low, steady, because I can't keep pretending that what you did and what you allowed didn't change me. I was trying to keep this family together. He muttered, "No, you were trying to keep the truth buried." I hung up. I sat there for a while, phone still in my hand, heart pounding like a drum inside a cage. And I felt something I didn't expect for the first time in years. Relief. I'd finally said it. Out loud. All of it. No editing. No filters. No sugarcoating. I told the truth. I stood up. Looked in the mirror. My face was puffy. My eyes red. But I looked more like myself than I had in years. Not the daughter. Not the peacekeeper. Just me. The next day. I didn't get any messages. Not from my dad. Not from my mom. Not from Sarah. Or Mark. Or anyone. Just silence. And for once, I welcomed it. There was no guilt. No panic. No second guessing. I sat by my apartment window with a cup of coffee and just breathed. The breath you take when you're no longer waiting for the next hit. That silence, once unbearable, had become peace. But peace has a price. Later that week, I found out through a cousin that the family had a group chat without me. They're done trying with me. I'm too bitter, too angry, too selfish. One of them even said I was poisoning the family spirit. I laughed. Because if speaking the truth, setting boundaries, and refusing to bankroll the man who once beat me unconscious makes me the villain, then I'll wear that title proudly. What they call bitterness, I call clarity. What they call selfishness, I call survival. They don't miss me. They miss the version of me that was easy, quiet, compliant, forgiving. They miss the girl who always said yes, but she's gone. And in her place is a woman who finally understands this. You can love people and still walk away from them. You can mourn what should have been while protecting what's left of you. You can want family and still refuse to let them destroy you. I started therapy. It's slow, hard, some weeks. I still wonder if I'm broken, if I overreacted. Suppose I'll ever feel like I truly belong anywhere. But every time I doubt myself, I return to that hospital room, to the girl with bruises on her face and silence in her throat, the one who was told her pain didn't matter, that keeping peace was more important than protecting herself. I don't know what she would say if she saw me now. Maybe she'd still be scared, but she'd also feel proud, because I chose her. I decided the girl no one stood up for, not even herself. And now, I don't need their group chats, or their fake apologies, or their twisted version of love. I've built something more substantial: boundaries, self-respect, a life that doesn't require me to bleed for acceptance. I won't pretend there aren't days I miss the idea of family, but I've stopped chasing the version of them I created in my head. They were never those people, and I was never meant to spend my life trying to earn a love that came with conditions. So I let them go. And in that letting go, I found something else, peace. Not the kind built on silence, but the kind built on truth. And now I'm asking you, Reddit AITA for finally choosing peace over a family who only remembered me when they needed saving.